Deep within the restricted veins of the Grand Canyon, the air changes. It turns cold, smelling of stale copper and earth that hasn't seen the sun in 10,000 years. You aren't supposed to be here, and the silence seems to agree, pressing against your eardrums with a weight that feels almost deliberate. Somewhere above, the desert sun scorches the rim, but down here, in the shadows of the forbidden zones, the darkness doesn't just sit, it seems to watch. One wrong step doesn't just mean a fall, it means vanishing into a part of the world that official maps claim doesn't exist. This is the edge of a conflict between what we are told and what the rock itself remembers. You are standing on a threshold where the geological record meets a silence so profound it feels like a warning. The Grand Canyon is often described as a geological open book, a billion years of history written in layers of red rock and limestone. But for over a century, whispers have persisted that some of those pages have been torn out and burned. The story begins not with a myth, but with a report that surfaced in the Arizona Gazette on April 5, 1909. It detailed the findings of a man named G.E. Kincaid, an explorer who reportedly traveled down the Colorado River in a small wooden boat. He wasn't looking for gold or fame, but what he allegedly stumbled upon would become one of the most enduring mysteries of the American West. The report didn't just hint at a small find. It spoke of a discovery that would fundamentally rewrite the story of human civilization in the Americas, a discovery that was immediately met with a wall of institutional silence. According to the report, Kincaid discovered a massive underground citadel carved into the very heart of the canyon wall. He described an entrance nearly impossible to reach, tucked away on a sheer cliff face in a region so remote it was practically a different planet. Inside, he didn't find the simple dwellings of ancient local tribes. Instead, his flashlight beam cut through the gloom to reveal vast, arched hallways, sophisticated ventilation systems, and a central hall filled with statues. He claimed these figures sat cross-legged, holding lotus flowers, reminiscent of deities from the Far East. He described artifacts made of copper and gold, and, most shockingly, rows of mummified remains. The air in those chambers was said to be perfectly still, preserving a city that had been silent for millennia. It was a subterranean empire, hidden in the one place no one would think to look. The implications of such a find would challenge every established timeline of human migration. It suggested a transoceanic connection between the ancient East and the Americas long before the written record allows. But as quickly as the story appeared, it vanished into a fog of official denial. The Smithsonian Institution, named in the article as the party backing the expedition, later stated they had no records of Kincaid or his discovery. They claimed no such explorer ever existed on their payroll, and no such cave was ever cataloged. The artifacts were nowhere to be found, and the cave itself seemed to have been swallowed by the canyon's vastness. For the skeptical, it was a sensationalist tale designed to sell newspapers. For others, it was the beginning of an era where certain discoveries were deemed too disruptive to acknowledge, leading to a systematic scrubbing of the public record. If you go looking for that original 1909 edition of the Arizona Gazette today, you might find a chilling obstacle. In many national libraries and digital archives, the records for that specific period are conspicuously absent, or the pages are damaged in a way that suggests intentional removal. It is as if a hand reached back through time to pluck the evidence from the shelf. This missing link in the archives is what transforms a local legend into a dark thriller of historical suppression. When the physical paper disappears, the mystery moves from the realm of archaeology to the realm of high-stakes cover-ups. The silence of the archives is often louder than the headlines themselves, suggesting that the information contained within those lost pages was a liability that the powers of the time could not afford to leave in circulation. Modern hikers and explorers who venture near the areas mentioned in the 1909 report often find themselves encountering more than just rough terrain. Large swaths of the Grand Canyon are currently designated as restricted zones, strictly off-limits to the general public. while the official reasons cite environmental protection, public safety, or the preservation of fragile indigenous sites. The heavy-handed presence of park rangers and reports of unidentified personnel in these areas have fueled a different narrative. Some travelers claim to have seen blacked-out helicopters hovering over specific, unnamed plateaus, their rotors echoing off the canyon walls in the dead of night. These are not the bright, liveried aircraft of search and rescue. These are machines designed to move in the shadows, patrolling a perimeter that doesn't appear on any tourist map. The atmosphere in these no-go zones is often described as suffocating. There is a psychological phenomenon reported by those who wander too close to the alleged site of Kincaid's cave, a feeling of intense dread, a biological alarm that triggers a deep-seated need to flee. Imagine standing on a ledge, the wind whipping past your face, and suddenly every nerve in your body screams that you are being hunted, not by an animal, but by the very weight of the air around you. It is as if the landscape itself is projecting a warning, a frequency that resonates in the marrow of your bones. This isn't just a fear of heights, it is the instinctive reaction of a human being sensing something that was never meant to be seen. Geologists note that the canyon contains a phenomenon known as the Great Unconformity, a massive gap in the rock record where hundreds of millions of years of Earth's history are simply missing. In some places, 500-million-year-old rock sits directly on top of 1.5 billion-year-old rock. The layers in between have been erased by time or tectonic forces. To the more curious, this missing time is more than a geological quirk. It is a physical blank space where an entire era of the world has been wiped away. In a place where history is literally written in stone, the existence of a billion-year gap is the ultimate mystery. It suggests that the ground we walk on is built upon a foundation of missing information, a void that might hold the remains of civilizations we can't even imagine. The giants mentioned in early reports are perhaps the most chilling aspect of the mystery. Scattered throughout the folklore of the Hopi and Paiute tribes are stories of the ant people who lived underground, and the Siteka, a race of red-haired giants who were said to be in constant conflict with local populations. These legends describe the giants as powerful beings who possessed knowledge beyond that of the surface dwellers. When Kincaid reported finding mummies that exceeded 7 or 8 feet in height, it gave a physical form to these ancient accounts. He described them wrapped in dark linens, their skin appearing like tanned leather, their stature dwarfing any modern human. If these beings were real, they would represent a branch of the human family tree that has been systematically pruned from our collective memory. Think of the sheer scale of the Grand Canyon. It is over 200 miles long and over a mile deep. It is a labyrinth of caves, most of which have never been stepped in by a human being in modern times. Exploring every crack and crevice would take lifetimes. This vastness provides the perfect cover for things that are meant to stay hidden. If there were indeed remains of an unknown civilization, or if the structures Kincaid described were real, they would be buried under tons of sediment or sealed behind barriers disguised as natural rock. The desert does not give up its secrets easily, and the canyon is the greatest vault on the continent. It is a place where you can hide a city, a culture, or a truth, and let the wind and the river guard it for eternity. The danger for the modern truth seeker is very real. The terrain is unforgiving. The heat, the lack of water, and the sheer cliffs claim lives every year. But there is a different kind of tension for those who look too closely at the restricted sectors. There are accounts of researchers who have had their equipment confiscated or have been met with stern warnings from authorities who refuse to explain why a particular cave or trail is off limits. The transition from a public national park to a high-security enclosure is often just a single, poorly marked sign away. Those who ignore the signs often find themselves escorted out of the area by personnel who do not wear standard uniforms, people whose only job is to ensure that the secrets of the rock remain beneath the rock. Consider the statues Kincaid described, figures sitting cross-legged, holding lotus flowers. The 1909 report claimed these figures were carved with a precision that suggested advanced tools, far beyond the capabilities of primitive nomadic tribes. In the early 1900s, copper was found in the canyon, but it was of a purity that puzzled miners. Could these have been the remnants of an industrial-scale operation conducted by a people we have no name for? When we look at the canyon today, we see a natural wonder, but through the lens of this dark mystery, we see the remnants of a forgotten empire. The rock isn't just stone, it is a marker for a civilization that history has largely overlooked, perhaps by design. The mummified remains present an even more disturbing question. If they were truly of immense size, as the old reports claim, where did they go? The denial from official institutions is total, yet the 1909 article was remarkably specific, naming names and detailing the interior of the chambers. It described a crossroom that functioned like a central hub, leading to hundreds of smaller chambers. It was a city for thousands, not a temporary shelter. If such a place existed, it couldn't simply disappear. It would have to be erased from the record, its entrance sealed or hidden behind a facade of natural-looking stone. This leads to the most unsettling theory of all, that the evidence wasn't moved, but rather integrated into the canyon itself. The petrified giants theory suggests that what Kincaid found were not just mummies, but remains that had undergone a process of mineralization, becoming part of the rock itself over eons. Imagine your flashlight beam hitting a wall, and instead of a flat surface, you see the unmistakable curve of a massive rib cage, or the hollow sockets of a skull the size of a boulder, both fused into the limestone. The horror of such a discovery would be profound. It would turn a geological expedition into a journey into the macabre. This might explain the persistent security presence, the monitoring of anomalies that shouldn't exist according to standard timelines. If these giants are turning to stone, they are becoming a literal part of the American landscape, hiding in plain sight as just another rock formation, waiting for the right light to reveal their true shape. As the wind howls through the narrow corridors of the inner canyon, it creates a sound that many locals call the canyon's moan. It's a low, resonant frequency that vibrates in your chest, a sound that feels older than the language of man. Some say it's just the wind hitting the rock faces at the right angle, a natural flute played by the desert. Others believe it is the sound of the earth breathing through the vast network of tunnels that Kincaid and others have hinted at. When you hear it, your pulse quickens. It's not a sound you want to hear when you are alone in the dark. It reminds you that you are a guest in a place that has seen empires rise and fall while remaining perfectly, terrifyingly still. Every few years, a new photograph or a blurry video emerges from a forbidden sector. It shows a rectangular opening high on a cliff, too symmetrical to be natural, or a strange metallic sheen deep within a crevasse where the sun never reaches. These fragments of evidence keep the mystery alive. They suggest that despite the efforts to seal the past, the canyon is too big to be completely silenced. It's a place where the shadows are thick with the ghosts of a history we aren't allowed to remember, a history that contradicts many of the textbooks we've ever read. The conflict here is one of perception. We want to believe that we have mapped the world, but the dark corners of the Grand Canyon remind us that we are only skimming the surface. As you stand on the rim and look down into the abyss, you are looking at more than just rock and shadow. You are looking at a barrier. And behind that barrier, the ancient world is still there, petrified and silent. The silence of the canyon isn't an absence of sound. It's a presence, a heavy, watchful guardian that ensures the giants of the past remain undisturbed. The danger isn't just in the falling. It's in what you might find if you actually reached the bottom and found the door that was never supposed to be opened. The canyon is a deep groove in the earth, and sometimes if you look deep enough into that groove, you see things that were never meant to be illuminated. The darkness of the Grand Canyon is the weight of 1,000 secrets pressing down from the rim to the floor. It is the feeling of being an intruder in a place that has its own rules. As long as the restricted zones remain and the records stay missing, the legend of the giants will continue to haunt the American West. It is a story with a redacted ending, a thriller that never truly reaches its climax because the most important evidence is buried where the sun never shines. The next time you see a map of the Grand Canyon, look at the blank spaces. Look at the areas where no trails are marked and where the topography is left vague. Those are the places where the shadows live. Deep in the gorge, where the river carves through the oldest rock, the water turns black in the moonlight. They say if you listen closely to the water as it hits the jagged rocks, you can hear names being whispered. Names of kings who ruled before the ocean shifted, and names of entities that still dwell in the unmapped tunnels. You might feel a sudden chill, a drop in temperature that has nothing to do with the night air. It's the breath of the canyon, coming from an opening you can't see, leading to a place you can never leave. This is the Grand Canyon's final truth. It doesn't just hold history, it consumes it. And for those who venture too far into the forbidden, the canyon becomes more than a destination. It becomes a permanent home, a silent addition to the rows of mummies and the petrified remains of a world we were never meant to know.